Hey class, today we're going to review the Spanish-American War for our quiz on Tuesday of next week. Alright, so the Spanish-American War. What starts out by we really need to define what imperialism is. Imperialism is a period of time when strong countries take over weak countries. For example, in class we mapped the empire of Spain. Spain at the time controlled the country of Spain, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Guam, and the Philippines. So it had its stake in 4 or 5 other different countries. When countries aim to become imperialistic and to take over other countries, they're trying to expand their empire, and they want to gain land, wealth, or power, and sometimes all three. So at this time, the United States is kind of looking to do that as well. They'd only taken mainland U.S. so far. The only 2 places we don't have yet in U.S. history were Alaska and Hawaii. So, this is the beginning. The U.S. wants to help Cuba. Now, I just said that Cuba was owned by Spain. So, the U.S. is going to trade with Cuba. They're going to have men who are going to have farms in Cuba that are raising sugarcane. So, they want to help them. But the problem with that is Spain is in control of Cuba. And to throw even more complications in, Cuba wants its independence from Spain. It wants to be an independent country. So America is going to promise to support Cuba's independence in order to protect our business there. We have businessmen at the shortest between the Keys right here in Cuba. It's about 90 miles. So that's as far as between here and Memphis almost. Alright, so in 1898, President McKinley is the President of the United States, and he really does not want to go to war. However, these extreme journalists are going to call for war. We're going to call that yellow journalism. In a couple of classes, we talked about how that's very similar to the fake news or clickbait of the day. It's getting people to try to buy their newspapers, but it's also twisting the truth, trying to push them one way or the other. These people want war. There's William McKinley. All right, these 2 guys that are the journalists that are causing these problems are Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst. So during this time, they're going to be really pushing for war because they're trying to protect the American interest in Cuba. Now, to protect the interest in Cuba, McKinley is going to send the USS Maine. That's a picture of the USS Maine battleship. And he's going to send it to the Havana Harbor in Cuba. And it's going to be there about a month to 6 weeks, and then something's going to happen. On February 15th, 1898, the USS Maine is going to blow up. Now, we really don't know what caused the explosion. It's still up for debate. Some people think that an accident happened where the magazine where they stored the gunpowder and the ammunition caught fire and it blew up. Some people think a Spanish soldier, Spanish spy snuck on board and lit it or put a bomb. Some people think a Spanish ship shot at it and with either a cannon or a torpedo-like device. But these yellow journalists blame Spain. Hearst and Pulitzer are going to blame Spain for that. They're going to call for war. And on April 20th, 1898, they're going to get their wish. The U.S. is going to declare war on Spain. Now, if you look in the bottom left, I'm going to show you a bigger picture for that. This is from the New York Journal. It says destruction of the warship Maine was the work of an enemy. So you can see that while we don't know what exactly happened with the USS Maine, we can see that this paper, the New York Journal, is pushing the idea that somebody besides the U.S. and besides an accident was to blame. You've also got who destroyed the Maine. We don't know, but they're pretty much telling us it has to be the work of an enemy. And then they use Assistant Secretary Roosevelt. That is the Theodore Roosevelt, the Teddy Roosevelt. He says he's convinced the explosion of the warship was not an accident. So the causes of the war. Number 1, the USS Maine explodes. Number 2, the U.S. is attempting to protect its business in Cuba. We're going to try to support Cuba's independence from Spain, and yellow journalists call for war. So if you can see the U, P, A, and Y are in red, so that kind of helps you to remember it's an mnemonic device. You pay. So what causes a war? You pay. USS Maine explodes. We protected American business in Cuba. America supports Cuba's independence from Spain, and yellow journalists call for war. The Spanish-American War. It's going to last from April to August of 1898, about 3.5 to 4 months. only 460 Americans are actually going to die while the fighting is going on and die in battle. However, 5,200 Americans die of disease. So that's an even bigger number. So about 56 to 2,000 or 56 to 6,000 Americans are going to end up dying. Assistant Secretary of the Navy Theodore Roosevelt has the Navy battle Spanish ships in the Philippines and destroy the Spanish fleet in the Pacific. Now, we talked about earlier and we mapped in class that they have the Philippines and Guam. Spain has the Philippines and Guam in the Pacific Ocean. The U.S. is going to want to try to take those territories and completely wipe out the Spanish empire while setting up its own empire. Theodore Roosevelt is actually going to resign as Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He's actually going to take a group of the Rough Riders. These Rough Riders are going to battle Spain in Puerto Rico. This is going to cause Theodore Roosevelt to become a national hero. At the Battle of San Juan Hill, the U.S. Army and the Rough Riders are riding up one side of the hill, and the Buffalo soldiers, the black African-American soldiers who are part of the U.S. Army, are going up the other side and trying to race to the finish. And history tells us, popular history anyway, tells us that it was Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders charging up San Juan Hill that won the battle. When in actuality, it was probably more the Buffalo soldiers who got there first and won the battle itself. The U.S. is going to win this war in less than 5 months. And then you can see a picture of Theodore Roosevelt here and a video or a photograph of that, or portrait. Now, if you look real close here, that might remind you of Theodore Roosevelt from The Night at the Museum. That's because in that movie, Robin Williams' character was based off of Teddy Roosevelt. So the outcome of the war, we're going to say CAT. Cuba gains their independence. That was number one. They were not part of the United States. They were their own independent country. America becomes a world power. So that's the A. And the third one, T, territories. The U.S. can control all 3 of the territories: Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. So Spain is going to lose Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. And the U.S. is going to gain Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. After the war, after the Spanish-American War, America was a world power. We held on to territories in Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam. Unfortunately, President McKinley is going to be shot in 1901, and Teddy Roosevelt is going to become president, much due to his war effort. I hope you enjoyed this video. It had a lot of good information. I wish I could say I put this PowerPoint together. I did not, but it was too good of a PowerPoint over the Spanish-American War to let it slide. If you have any questions, please email me or text me on Remind. Our quiz is going to be, let's see, on the 12th, no, the 11th, 9/11 next Tuesday. Thanks.